A is for ASL, because deaf people need language. They also need a way to chat and talk. B is for British Sign Language, or BSL. That's important because ASL comes from BSL. C is for community, because deaf people are all connected, and the community is very small. D is for deaf, because deaf people can't hear anything, and they use sign language. E is for deaf entertainers. This is important because deaf people love to use sign language in movies, and they love to entertain people. F is for French Sign Language, or FSL, because ASL, a lot of it comes from FSL. G is for Gallaudet University. Gallaudet was the first college that was specifically for deaf people, hard of hearing people, and hearing people who want to participate. H is for hearing aids, because hearing aids help people who can't hear anything, and it helps them communicate with deaf people and hearing people. I is for interpreters. Interpreters help deaf people communicate with hearing people. J is for jokes. Deaf jokes are very different from hearing jokes. K is for kids, because kids are sometimes born into a family that's deaf, with deaf parents, or sometimes a kid who's deaf is born into a hearing family. L is for language. Language is super important, and it helps deaf people because it helps them communicate with other deaf people or hard of hearing people or hearing people. M is for music. Deaf people like to really feel music, because deaf people can feel it as long as it's loud. And it involves deaf culture. N is for name signs, because they help show your personality. O is for offensive. Deaf people say offensive jokes often. P is for poems. Deaf people like to say poems in ASL. Q is for quotes, especially from deaf people. One quote is that deaf people can do anything that hearing people can do. The only difference is that deaf people can't hear. That's by King Jordan. R is for roads, and it also means traveling with deaf people. Deaf people often sign, and they have people drive for them when they're signing. S is for School for the Deaf. One school for the deaf is in Fremont. T is for TTY. TTY is an important way for deaf people to communicate with hearing people. It helps them connect. U is for understanding. In the deaf community, it's important to show someone that you understand what they're saying. There are 3 ways to show that. Sign understand, nod your head, and sign oh I see. V is for vibrations. Many hearing people believe that deaf people can't listen to music, but they can enjoy music too by feeling the vibrations in the floor if the music is very loud. W is for worldwide. Sign language is used all over the world. Different languages have different sign languages. There's American Sign Language, British Sign Language, and Chinese Sign Language. There are many different kinds of sign language. It's interesting because if you travel to one place, you won't see sign language just in one place. All over the world they use it. If you go to Martha's Vineyard, you'll see sign language often, but there are still many other places that use sign language. X is for Xerox. Way back before they had the TTY and the CRS, deaf people had to communicate with hearing people, but they didn't know how. It's possible that deaf people would use Xerox to scan things, write things, scan things, and send it to people, whether it's their friends or family or work. They couldn't call people and texting was hard, so why not? Y is for yelling. If a deaf person gets mad, they can show it to you by their signs becoming large. Everything becomes bigger and more loud. It's interesting because deaf people don't have a voice to show that they're mad, but their signs can definitely show it if people make them mad. Z is for zoo. Back in ASL 1, our first ASL homework was to do ABC Zoo, which means you find one animal for each letter of the alphabet. It's interesting because still in ASL 4, we use the ABCs to teach ASL and to help students and deaf people.